The velvet rope brushed my wrist when she lifted it, not carefully, not politely. The way you move furniture out of your path when you're in a hurry and the furniture doesn't matter. Excuse me. Bianca Talbot's voice carried easily across the entrance hall. She glanced back at the line of donors waiting behind her, and something in her expression shifted. The particular look of someone who has decided to perform for an audience they've just noticed. She's just handling check-in. A few people in line laughed softly. My face went hot, because I was not handling check-in. I was Piper Talbot, Operations Director for the Ardent Arts Club Annual Gala. The person who had spent 3 full months planning every detail of this evening. The table assignments, the donor flow, the catering timeline, the lighting sequence for the ballroom, the security protocol for the restricted donor lounge. Every single piece of the night that was currently running smoothly around us. That was my work. But Bianca stepped past the velvet rope, like I was simply an obstacle in her path. Then she turned back toward the waiting guests and added, with a small, easy laugh that sounded almost affectionate, "Some people belong behind the rope." The words landed on me like something physical. My fingers tightened around my clipboard. Because Bianca wasn't just a guest tonight, she was my sister-in-law. The guests in line smiled and moved forward, already past the moment, already focused on the golden lights spilling out of the ballroom entrance and the evening ahead of them. But Bianca didn't walk away immediately. She took one step toward the rope, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and very deliberate, and leaned forward slightly. "You should really remember your place," she murmured. Not loudly. Not for the crowd this time, just for me. Her eyes held mine for exactly 1 second. Long enough to make sure I'd heard. Long enough to make sure the message had landed cleanly. Then she turned and walked into the VIP entrance like the whole interaction had never happened. I stood at the rope with my clipboard pressed against my chest. The check-in volunteer beside me was looking carefully at the guest list on her tablet. The specific focused look of someone choosing not to acknowledge what they have just witnessed. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment anymore. Because I recognized this moment. This wasn't an impulse. Bianca hadn't arrived tonight intending to be charming and accidentally said something that came out wrong. This was planned. The audience, the timing, the sentence about the rope. She had been building toward something like this for months. My name is Piper Talbot. My mother, Constance Talbot, spent 6 years helping to build the Ardent Arts Club from the ground up. She joined the founding committee when I was 12 years old and put 20 years of her energy, her connections, and her particular gift for bringing people together into making it one of the most respected private arts organizations in the city. Private membership, exclusive events, a donor network that supported 3 local arts programs, and a youth scholarship fund that had sent 43 students to conservatories and fine arts programs across the country. When my mother passed away 4 years ago, I stayed. I had been working alongside her since my mid-20s. I knew the membership, I knew the donors, I knew every vendor, every venue partner, every volunteer coordinator, every detail that kept this institution running the way she had built it to run. My brother Felix joined the board 2 years after she passed. He had our mother's warmth and her ease with people, even if the operational side of things had never been his particular strength. He was good at the board, he was good at relationships, he was well-liked by the members and generous with his time. Then he married Bianca, and Bianca decided almost immediately that the Ardent Arts Club was now, in some meaningful way, hers. The first dinner happened 6 weeks after the wedding. Felix had arranged it. A small family meal at his house, relaxed and low-key, the kind of evening that was meant to feel normal after months of formal wedding events and organized gatherings. Bianca was charming through most of it. She asked questions, she laughed at the right moments. She was, for most of the evening, exactly the kind of person you hoped your brother had found. Then the conversation turned to the club's upcoming spring benefit, and she mentioned it the way people mention something that belongs to them. "Our club downtown is hosting something in April," she said to Felix's friend across the table, with the easy confidence of someone describing their own home. I looked at Felix. He was passing the salad. He either hadn't noticed or hadn't found it worth addressing in the moment. I couldn't tell which. It's a beautiful venue, Bianca continued. Very exclusive. I'm actually involved in some of the planning this year. She wasn't. She had attended one board dinner as Felix's spouse. She had not been asked to contribute to any planning process. She had no role in operations of any kind. But she said it so naturally, so confidently that Felix's friends simply nodded. My stomach twisted quietly. That was the first time I heard her use the word our about something that wasn't hers. It would not be the last. Bianca had a gift for half-truths. She never said anything that was so obviously false that it could be immediately corrected in a social setting without causing awkwardness. Everything she said existed in a careful middle space, not quite accurate, but not quite wrong enough to challenge comfortably in the middle of a dinner or a hallway conversation. Part of the ownership family was her favorite phrase when introducing herself to donors or club members she was meeting for the first time. Technically, Felix was a board member. Technically, the Talbot name was connected to the club's founding story. Technically, there was a thread of truth she could pull on if anyone questioned her. But the impression she created, that she held genuine operational authority, that she was part of the decision-making structure, that her instructions or opinions should carry the same weight as those of the actual staff, was not accurate. And the staff noticed. The floor manager mentioned it to me after one spring event, carefully and diplomatically, the way employees bring up sensitive things when they aren't sure how much they're allowed to say. She told the catering lead the appetizer order needed to change, he said. I just wanted to flag it so you know. I thanked him. I made a note. And I started paying closer attention to exactly what Bianca was doing when nobody was watching her directly. The seating chart incident happened about 2 months before the gala. I had been working on the donor table layout for 3 weeks, a painstaking process that took into account giving history, relationship dynamics, organizational affiliations, and the very specific art of placing people near others they would genuinely enjoy speaking with for 3 hours. It mattered. The right seating arrangement made for productive donor conversations. The wrong one could sour relationships that had taken years to build. I had finalized a version I felt good about and left it printed on the operations table in the club office on a Thursday afternoon while I stepped out to meet with the caterer. When I came back, 3 table assignments had been changed. Not moved in a way consistent with any operational logic I could identify. Moved in a way that suggested someone had looked at the chart and decided their preferred guests should sit closer to the head tables. I asked the front desk assistant whether anyone had come through the office while I was out. She hesitated. Bianca stopped by, she said carefully. She looked at the chart for a little while. I restored the original layout without saying anything to Bianca directly that afternoon. I simply corrected it, documented that it had been changed without authorization, and sent a brief all-staff note reminding everyone that the operations materials were not to be adjusted without my approval. Bianca appeared in my office the following morning wearing a tight, pleasant smile. After the seating chart incident, Bianca became more careful about the direct, obvious interventions, but she shifted her approach rather than stopping entirely. Instead of changing documents or redirecting staff in ways that could be easily traced, she began working on something harder to document, the way she described me to other people. At donor receptions, if someone asked about event planning, she would say, "Oh, Piper handles all the logistics for us." The word handles made it sound like I managed a checklist. The word us implied she was my superior in some undefined way. The combination was perfectly engineered to land as a compliment while quietly diminishing the actual scope of what I did. "She's very organized," she said to a major donor at one pre-gala cocktail gathering, with a warmth in her voice that sounded genuine from a distance. The donor looked at me and said, "Oh, that's great. We need good organizers at these things. Not leaders. Not directors. Organizers." I smiled and changed the subject to the donor's foundation work. But I held on to every interaction because I had learned from watching Bianca operate over several months that she was patient and methodical. She wasn't going to do something dramatic all at once. She was building a picture slowly, and I was starting to understand that she intended tonight, the biggest event of our year, to be the moment she completed it. 2 weeks before the gala, I opened the VIP guest list to do my final review and found 10 names I didn't recognize. They were added to the bottom of the list in a clean, formatted block, typed in the same template as the official list, as if they had been there all along and I had simply not noticed them until now. I recognized none of the names. None of them had been submitted through the proper board approval process. None of them had membership standing with the club. None of them appeared in our donor database in any capacity. I pulled the edit history on the document. The additions had been made from a login that wasn't mine, wasn't the board administrator's, and wasn't anyone on the operations team. I removed all 10 names and restored the approved list. Then I sent a formal note to the board administrator, documenting what had occurred and requesting that the guest list document be restricted to authorized users only going forward. The next morning, Bianca walked into my office. She closed the door. "You removed my guests," she said. "They weren't approved through the board process," I said. "I'm Felix's wife. The approval process exists regardless of who submits the names. I'd be happy to send you the submission form if you'd like to request additions through the proper channel." Her expression didn't change on the surface, but something behind her eyes went very still. She didn't raise her voice. That was the thing about Bianca that I had come to understand. She almost never raised her voice. She had learned that quiet, controlled communication was far more effective than anger because it gave the other person nowhere to push against. You can respond to an argument. It's harder to respond to someone who simply looks at you with steady, certain eyes and waits. "You embarrassed me," she said. "I followed the guest list approval policy," I said. "The same policy that applies to every submission. I submitted names in good faith. I understand. The process exists to make sure the board reviews all additions. It protects the event, Piper." She said my name in a particular way, not harshly, but with a weight in it, like she was placing something heavy on top of it. "Be careful." She said it quietly enough that it could have been concern. Advice from someone who cared about how things went for me. But we both knew it wasn't. "Have a good evening," I said. She looked at me for one long moment. Then she turned and left. I sat in my office afterward and thought about that pause, the specific quality of it. Not the anger of someone who has lost a small battle. The patience of someone who has simply decided to wait for a better moment. The gala was in 2 weeks, and I understood now that she already had a plan for it. The night of the gala, everything I had spent 3 months building came together in the way that good planning occasionally produces. Cleanly, smoothly, with enough flexibility built in that the small, unexpected moments could be absorbed without disruption. The ballroom glowed. The chandeliers threw warm light across tables, set with white linens and small arrangements of deep blue flowers. Donors arrived in evening wear and filled the space with the particular energy of a room full of people who genuinely care about something and have shown up to support it. The auction items were displayed beautifully. The catering timing was precise. The sound check had gone smoothly that afternoon. Every volunteer had been briefed and was stationed where I needed them. I stood near the entrance, holding my clipboard, and watched it all running the way I had designed it to run. For 20 minutes, it was exactly the night I had worked for. Then Bianca arrived. She came through the main entrance at the head of a group, Felix at her side and several other guests behind them. Wearing a floor-length burgundy gown, and moving with the energy of someone who had been looking forward to this evening for reasons that had nothing to do with arts philanthropy. She reached the rope. She lifted it. And then she looked at the line of guests behind her, said those 9 words, and turned the entire entrance hall into an audience. But in the moment after the rope dropped and the crowd moved forward, something small and specific caught my eye. It was the bracelet on her wrist. Not jewelry, a slim red event bracelet, the kind made of woven fabric with a small metal clasp that we issued exclusively to board members and event leadership staff at the beginning of each gala evening. Red bracelets provided access to the restricted donor lounge on the second floor. They allowed the wearer to move freely through security checkpoints that general admission guests couldn't pass. They were issued from a sealed envelope by the board administrator at the start of each event and tracked carefully because of exactly what they unlocked. I issued those bracelets personally. I had issued them at 4 o'clock that afternoon to the 12 board members and 4 operations staff on the evening's approved leadership list. Bianca's name was not on that list. I had not issued her a bracelet. I stood at the entrance rope and looked at the red band on her wrist for a long, careful moment. Then I looked at the check-in volunteer beside me. "Did you see where that bracelet came from?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "She already had it when she arrived," she said. My pulse shifted, not racing, just steadier, more focused. The particular feeling of a situation clarifying into something specific that requires a specific response. I needed to find out exactly how she had gotten that bracelet, because the answer mattered more than I could fully explain in a few seconds at a velvet rope entrance. I found the floor manager near the catering station at the back of the ballroom. His name was Ali. Reliable, experienced, someone who had worked 4 previous galas with me and who I trusted to give me accurate information without embellishment. I pulled him slightly away from the table flow and kept my voice low. "Did you see who gave Bianca the red bracelet?" He looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this question and is not entirely sure how to answer it. "She came into the staging area around 4:30, he said. "I was setting up near the supply table. She went through the bracelet envelopes. I should have stopped her." He looked genuinely troubled about this. "She said she'd been added to the leadership list and that you'd forgotten to pull her bracelet before you left. She seemed certain about it." I nodded once. "You're not in trouble," I said. "Thank you for telling me." I walked back toward the entrance corridor and stood for a moment thinking. She had gone through the staging area when I wasn't there. She had located the bracelet envelopes, which were clearly labeled and placed with the event materials, and she had taken one and applied it to her wrist, without authorization, without my knowledge. And a red bracelet meant one specific thing that made this far more serious than a seating chart change or an unauthorized guest list addition. It meant she had access to the restricted donor lounge upstairs. The restricted donor lounge was on the second floor of the club, a private room accessible only by a staircase, monitored by security at the gala, and a badge reader door that responded only to red bracelet wristbands scanned against the sensor. The lounge was where our highest-level donors gathered privately before the main auction began. It was where confidential pledge discussions took place, where the board chair met with major contributors to discuss multi-year giving commitments, where the silent auction's premium items were displayed ahead of the public bidding round, viewable only by verified registered attendees. The reason access was restricted wasn't elitism for its own sake. It was legal and operational necessity. Donors in that room were making financial commitments in a confidential setting. Non-registered individuals in that space created liability issues, potential privacy violations, and the kind of trust problems that could damage the club's relationships with its most significant supporters permanently. I knew Bianca understood none of this. Or more accurately, I knew she understood that access to the lounge meant status, proximity to the most important people in the room, and an opportunity to position herself exactly where she most wanted to be. I moved quickly to the hallway monitor near the operations station. I pulled up the second-floor camera feed, and what I saw on the screen made my chest go cold. Bianca was already in the corridor outside the donor lounge. She was not alone. Behind her were 3 individuals, 2 women and a man, none of whom I recognized from the approved guest list. None of them wore red bracelets. None of them had donor registration status in our system. None of them had been through the VIP check-in process that every general admission guest went through at the entrance. They were simply there, moving through a restricted area of the building that they had absolutely no authorization to access. Bianca was speaking to them with the easy confidence of a personal tour guide, showing friends around a private space she had decided belonged to her. I watched the screen for approximately 5 seconds. The donor lounge door was still closed. They hadn't entered yet. The security staff at the door were currently occupied with verifying another guest's bracelet on the far side of the corridor. My window was narrow. If those 4 people entered the donor lounge with unregistered guests present, the situation became significantly more complicated. Donors inside would be aware of the breach, the board chair would be directly impacted, and the potential for damage to the evening's most sensitive donor relationships would be real and immediate. I reached for my radio, but before I called security directly, I needed to alert the right person first. The board president, Arthur Nwachukwu, had arrived 10 minutes earlier. I needed to find him. I located Arthur near the beverage tables at the far edge of the ballroom. He was speaking with one of the founding members. A conversation, I could tell from his posture, was warm but not deeply focused. He saw me approach and read my expression immediately. Arthur had been running this board for 7 years. He knew what the operations director's face looked like when something needed his attention. He excused himself from the conversation smoothly and stepped toward me. I kept my voice very low. I have an unauthorized access situation on the 2nd floor. An event credential was taken without authorization from the staging area, and 3 unregistered guests are currently in the restricted corridor with access to the donor lounge. He was very still for exactly 1 moment. The lounge hasn't been breached yet? Not as of 2 minutes ago. I'm going up now. Have you documented the credential issue? The floor manager witnessed the bracelet being taken from the staging supply at 4:30. I have his verbal confirmation. I have the camera feed showing the current situation upstairs. Arthur looked at me steadily. This could disrupt the whole donor session, he said quietly. It will disrupt it more if we let it continue, I said. He considered this for a moment that felt longer than it probably was. His jaw settled. Go, he said quietly. I was already moving. I went to the operations station first and pulled the hallway monitor recording onto a time-stamped export. The corridor footage showing Bianca and her 3 unregistered guests near the donor lounge, with the time code and bracelet scan log attached. I also printed the evening's bracelet issuance record. 12 board members, 4 operations staff, 16 bracelets total, 16 names, all verified and authorized. Bianca's name was not on the list. No additional bracelet had been formally issued after 4 o'clock. I attached the staging area incident note from the floor manager. A brief written summary he had put together in the 10 minutes since our conversation, dated and initialed. 3 documents, clear, factual, time-stamped. I organized them into a single folder and clipped it under my arm. Then I went upstairs. Bianca and her guests were still in the corridor when I reached the 2nd floor. The donor lounge door remained closed. The security staff had, without being aware of the full situation, simply held the entry process in standard operation, and the timing had worked in our favor. Bianca saw me coming. She smiled. The comfortable smile of someone who expected to manage whatever conversation was coming next. She had been managing conversations with me for months and walking away from each one exactly as she had arrived. She didn't know yet that tonight was different. I took a breath at the top of the staircase. Below me in the ballroom, the gala continued at full warmth. The sound of conversation and soft music drifted up through the open atrium. The chandeliers threw light down into the space and made it look exactly the way it was supposed to look. Beautiful and alive and carefully put together. My brother Felix was down there somewhere. I knew his speech was scheduled for 9 o'clock, a brief, warm address to the donors, thanking them for their continued support. He had practiced it twice with me earlier in the week. He was good at speeches. He would be wonderful at it. And I had caught, on my way past the main floor, a glimpse of Bianca near the stage area. Close to the podium, in position to stand beside Felix when he spoke, in a spot that communicated to every donor in the room that she was part of the leadership of this organization. She had positioned herself there deliberately. She had planned the whole evening as a statement, the velvet rope moment at the entrance, the positioning near the stage for Felix's speech, the stolen bracelet, and the access it gave her to the most exclusive space in the building. All of it calculated. All of it designed to build a picture of herself in front of hundreds of the city's most influential donors. But the documentation folder under my arm told a completely different picture, and Arthur Nwachukwu was about to see it. Arthur had followed me upstairs quietly. He arrived at the second-floor landing 2 minutes after I did, and I handed him the folder without speaking. He opened it and read through the 3 documents while standing in the corridor, his expression shifting from attentive to something more set and deliberate as he moved through each page. Bianca was still 20 feet away with her guests. She had noticed Arthur's arrival and straightened slightly, the automatic response of someone who recognizes the board president walking toward their section of the hallway. Arthur closed the folder. He looked at me. "Is all of this accurate?" he asked. "Yes, the floor manager is available to confirm his statement. The camera footage is time-coded and already exported." He was quiet for a moment. The particular quality of his silence was not uncertainty. It was the silence of someone who has made a decision and is simply organizing the sequence of steps. "You have full operations authority tonight," he said. "That includes the management of credential violations and unauthorized access." I looked at him carefully. "You're telling me to handle it." "I'm confirming that you already have the authority to handle it," he said. "You've had it all evening." He handed the folder back to me. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "Your mother would have handled it exactly the same way." He turned and walked back toward the staircase to return to the ballroom. I stood in the corridor for exactly 3 seconds after Arthur descended the stairs. 3 seconds to settle the feeling in my chest. Not quite nervousness, not quite resolve. Something that sat between those 2 things and gradually shifted into something steady and clear. Then I walked toward Bianca. She saw me coming. Her posture shifted slightly, a barely perceptible straightening, the adjustment of someone preparing for a conversation while trying to appear relaxed about it. Her 3 guests were looking at the framed artwork along the corridor wall, apparently unaware of the specifics of what was happening. Bianca watched me close the distance between us with the expression she always wore when I approached her in operational contexts, politely tolerant, slightly amused, already framing whatever I was about to say as something she would be gracious enough to address and dismiss. I stopped a comfortable, professional distance away. "Bianca," I said. "Piper." She tilted her head slightly. "Everything okay?" "Your guests need to step away from the restricted area," I said. "The donor lounge is for registered, authorized attendees only. None of the 3 individuals with you are registered for this event." She looked at her guests briefly, then back at me. "They're my guests," she said. "They're not registered," I said. "And the restricted access here requires registration." And then she smiled that smile, the one she always used when she thought the conversation was already over. "Relax, Piper," she said. "Remember your place." For a fraction of a second, those 2 words sat in the air between us. The same 2 words she had whispered to me at the rope downstairs. Repeated now, upstairs, in a corridor outside the most exclusive space in the building. Said quietly, confidently, like the sentence had worked before and would work again. I looked at her for exactly 1 calm moment. Then I turned and nodded to the security officer stationed at the donor lounge door. He stepped forward. He was professional and unhurried. "I'm going to need to ask your guests to return to the main floor," he said to Bianca. "This area requires advance registration. If you'd like to bring these guests to the check-in desk, they can be registered for general admission." One of Bianca's guests immediately looked uncomfortable. She turned to the man beside her and exchanged a quick, quiet word. "This is unnecessary," Bianca said. "It's policy," the security officer replied. The sound of voices from downstairs drifted up through the atrium, the warm hum of a successful evening moving forward smoothly below us. The auction was beginning. Donors were finding their paddles. Felix would take the stage in less than 30 minutes. Bianca's composure held for a moment longer than I expected. Then, when her guests began moving toward the staircase without her instruction, simply responding to the security officer's calm authority, something in her expression shifted, the first real crack. Her guests descended the stairs with the slightly embarrassed energy of people who have ended up in a situation they didn't fully sign up for and are relieved to have a clear path out of it. Security accompanied them down. Bianca and I were left in the second-floor corridor. The murmur from the ballroom below floated up, warm, unaware of anything happening above it. Bianca looked at me and I recognized the exact moment she shifted strategies. The gracious tolerance dropped. The quiet threat dropped. She landed on something raw underneath both of them. "You've been waiting for this," she said quietly. "I've been doing my job," I said. "You want to humiliate me in front of Felix's entire network. I want to protect the donor lounge from unauthorized access, which is what the policy requires and what I'm responsible for managing." You took the bracelet report to Arthur. Arthur is the board president. Credential violations go to him. You've been building a case against me for months. I paused for one brief moment. I've been documenting incidents, I said. That's standard operations management. Her jaw tightened. You can't do this, she said. Yes, I said. I can. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs, steady, deliberate ones, and looked to see Arthur Nwachukwu reaching the top of the landing. Behind him, just visible at the foot of the stairs, was Felix. Arthur walked to the center of the corridor and addressed the moment with the specific composure that comes from years of board leadership. The ability to hold a room's attention without raising his voice, without performing authority, simply by being clearly and calmly in charge. I want to be straightforward about what happened this evening, he said. He looked at Bianca directly, then at the space around us, then back. An event credential was obtained without authorization from the operations staging area. 3 unregistered guests were brought to a restricted area of this building. Both of these actions are in violation of the club's event policy. He paused. The ballroom sounds floated up from below. The auction had started. I could hear the first item being announced. Piper Talbot identified these violations, documented them accurately, and reported them through the correct channels, Arthur continued. She handled this with full operational authority and with complete professionalism. His gaze settled on Bianca. She was looking at him with the expression of someone who had been counting on a different ending to this scene and was now processing in real time that the ending she planned was not the one arriving. Arthur glanced at me and gave a single, brief nod. The nod that meant, "It's yours. Finish it correctly." I turned to Bianca. I held the folder in both hands, and I said the words I had been authorized to say. "Your access is revoked for the remainder of the evening." I said it quietly, not loudly, the way I said every significant operational statement, clearly, precisely, without additional emphasis because the words themselves were already sufficient. Bianca stared at me. For a moment she looked like she was going to laugh. "You're joking," she said. "No." The security officer reappeared at the top of the stairs. He stood a respectful distance behind me, not advancing, simply present. Available. Bianca looked at him, then at Arthur, then back at me. And something moved through her expression that I hadn't seen before. Not the controlled, strategic composure she always maintained, not the warm, tolerant performance she used in front of donors, not the ice she had shown me in private moments. Something underneath all of those layers. Something that looked, for just a few seconds before she brought everything back under control, like the expression of someone who had confidently walked into a room they believed was theirs and discovered, too late, that every door in it opened only for someone else. "Felix is going to hear about this," she said. "Felix is welcome to speak with me or with Arthur at any point," I said. I looked at her steadily. "I'll walk you down," I said. We descended the staircase together. Not dramatically. Not with any kind of procession or announcement. Just the two of us moving down the stairs from the second floor to the main level, with the security officer following at a professional distance behind. The ballroom was at full energy when we reached the ground floor. The auction was moving through its third item. Paddles were raised. Donors were engaged and generous and completely focused on the evening my mother had built, and I had spent 3 months preparing. We passed the edge of the ballroom. Several people near the entrance looked up. Donors who had known my mother, staff members who had been watching the evening with pride. A few board members near the door who clocked the situation instantly and quietly moved their eyes away. We passed the spot near the bar, where Bianca had positioned herself to stand beside Felix for his speech. We passed the catering table, where the evening was unfolding perfectly. We passed the check-in station, where I had been standing when she lifted the velvet rope and told a room full of people that some of us belonged behind it. I walked her to the entrance. The front door was ahead. The cool night air was just beyond it. I pushed the door open and held it. Bianca walked through it without looking at me. The velvet rope was behind us now. The humiliation she had planned for me had followed her out instead. Felix and I talked 3 days later. He came to the club in the afternoon, not to argue, not to defend, but to sit across from me in the office where our mother used to manage this same institution and simply be my brother for a while. He had seen the documentation. Arthur had sent it to all board members the morning after the gala, as part of the standard incident report process. He was quiet for a long time after he arrived. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten," he said. "I know. I should have paid closer attention." "Yes," I said, "you should have." He looked at the window for a moment. "She convinced me you were being territorial," he said, "that it was a personality conflict. It wasn't. I know that now." We sat together in the kind of silence that siblings sometimes need. The kind that doesn't require resolution yet, just acknowledgement that something real happened, and both people are still here. 3 weeks after the gala, the board voted unanimously to formalize my title as Club Operations Director with full executive authority. Arthur called me afterward to say the vote had been brief and clear. Some people believe that status comes from the person you marry. That a name or a connection or the right seat at the right table is what makes you powerful in a room. But rooms like this one, rooms built by people who gave decades of themselves to something larger, don't run on borrowed authority. They run on real work. The night Bianca tried to put me behind the velvet rope was the night she discovered who actually controlled the door.